Welcome to the Healers Café, the #1 show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart to heart conversations about their day to day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. Welcome to the Healers Cafe. And today I have with me Josh Dech. And he's an ex-paramedic and holistic nutritionist that is specializing in Crohn's and colitis and other obviously related gut issues. And basically, after reversing well over 250 cases, um, doctors started questioning and looking at him. I'm going to get you going into that in more detail.
Sure.
But why don't we first start? First of all, well, welcome. And why don't we start like what got you focused? What happened? Why this path? Let's start there.
Yeah, it's a great question. It was a lot of happy accidents. I was a paramedic, like you said, my first career. I graduated at age of 19 and started very young, very early. But it was sick care, right? As I'm sure you're aware, we pick the same people up for the same conditions over and over. They go back to the hospital for the same medication or a different medication for the same condition until they died from that same condition. So it never actually got fixed.
Yeah.
And it was sort of this belief that disease is innate to the human body. These are the conditions you just have. And the only way to patch that hole is with pharmaceutical drugs until you die. And that just didn't sit right with me. And through a chain of happy accidents, once again, I
Hmm.
ended up becoming a personal trainer. So here I am, 21, 22, very short paramedic career. And one of my first clients who came to see me, 57-year-old woman, she was on 17 pills and insulin for breakfast. She had 9 pills and insulin for bedtime. She had CPAP machine for bedtime. She had hypertension. She was on disability, the works. And so here we are now, 2 years later, focusing on food, nutrition, exercise, lifestyle, basic stuff. 59 years old, Minot, and she ended up breaking a world record in a weightlifting competition, and she kept breaking them up till about 62, 63 when she retired. It was amazing. Yeah, but that was my first window into like the human body can heal itself. It's remarkable. And so once we started on that track, I realized that there's more to this, and I started diving, even as a personal trainer, more into depression, anxiety, joint pain. And I started understanding that even these conditions, mechanical functional conditions, like people coming in with what is a risk condition? I forget now. It's eluding my brain today, to apologize. Um, carpal tunnel syndrome, or with joint dysfunction, or they had the doctors called quote functional neurological issues in their hips and feet. It was all fixable. We get people who have seen the Mayo Clinic and had surgeries in 8 weeks. Their pain and their nerve pain was gone because we just restructured the muscles. And the same thing we found happened inside. As we regulated the nervous system, fixed the food, fixed the gut, skin issues, depression, anxiety, insomnia, mental health conditions, inflammatory conditions all just disappeared. And
Mm.
so one thing led to another. I started diving in. I was at a trade show and I watched a woman talk about the gut. And 30 minutes, my jaw was on the floor. It was love at first sight. I said, that's what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I saved up, went back to school, became a nutritionist, and here we are. And I'm specializing in the worst gut diseases. And it's the most fascinating career I could have ever asked to fall into.
Wow, that's really very enthusiastic for truly a condition that most people still believe, can't be fixed. It's like, oh, well, guess I'm gonna have to cut out a piece of my gut or it runs in the family because maybe they eat the same
Yeah.
stuff. So, yeah, no, it's very interesting. So nutrition is the main aspect you're changing with people to help them?
Well, it depends on where they are on the spectrum. So, dealing with Crohn's colitis, nutrition is actually one of the things I address the least,
Okay.
interesting enough, because most people on the Crohn's colitis that ends up coming to see us with severe gut disease, they've really tried a lot of everything. I like to say the people we help most are those who have tried everything, every
Yep.
supplement, diet, protocol, and aren't getting help from their doctor. And that's who we tend to help. So a lot of these people do have the nutrition dialed in, but there's a small percentage who still eat the same standard American garbage, frozen food, packaged food, fried foods. Um, but most of them do have their diet dialed in. So we have to actually get to the root of inflammation beyond just food and nutrition, the
Okay.
actual things driving the inflammation in their immune system in the first place.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'd
Expand.
love to. Sure. So So I've actually created this little like a Venn diagram. It's this three-ring Venn diagram where I describe the root of gut disease. Now, pertaining to Crohn's colitis specifically, but for those listening who go, well, I'm not really interested in Crohn's colitis, or maybe I don't have it myself, I want to be very clear. I look at gut health as a spectrum, right? I describe it as wearing a pair of shoes without socks, and that heel rubs and it gets a little red and it gets a little blistered until it bleeds. And that's sort of the spectrum of something like bloat today, irritable bowel syndrome tomorrow, and then Crohn's or colitis the next day. It's this progressive deterioration of the GI tract. And so what we look at is really there's typically three root causes for all this to start happening. The first one we have to look at, this is the first ring of my three-ring Venn diagram, is toxins. Now, toxins can be anything. Commonly in the gut disease space, we see mold toxins, we see heavy metal toxins, we see environmental toxins can be a part of it. What are you breathing? What are you drinking? What are you eating? Are there toxins in your food, your perfumes, your chemicals? They tend to be lower on the totem pole. But if we think of it this way, our health is like a glass of water, right? Now, our illness is our ability to empty that glass, how healthy we can stay. But if we fill that glass and it overflows, that's when we have symptoms, we develop disease. But obviously, that disease started as soon as the glass started filling up. If you can't empty that glass, well, eventually it's going to overflow, and eventually you have disease, which is where diseases start, sometimes many months or many years
Yeah.
prior to you having true symptoms or diagnosis. And so, as this glass fills up, maybe toxins are one drop in the bucket. That's okay. Maybe mold toxicity or something else is 50% of your bucket. Everyone's going to have a different ratio, but toxins are what's filling this glass of water, leading to overflow. The second thing we have to look at is microbial imbalances. Now, for a lot of individuals, this is going to be things like in the Crohn's colitis space specifically, we see candida or fungal overgrowth. We see a fair bit of parasites, probably 50-60% of our clientele is dealing with parasites. We also see Clostridia, which is a specific strain of bacteria. Many people might be prone or familiar with C. diff from the hospital, right? Clostridium difficile, that's a Clostridia species or a strain in the species umbrella. So these are what we see in microbes. Now we know our gut bacteria. Fun fact, Manon, when we are born, we're about 99% human cells. And as an ND, I'm sure you're familiar with this. We're born 99% human. 1% of our makeup is actually bacteria. It's fungi and bacteria and all these species that
Right.
get into our gut and they colonize on our skin through the birth canal. When we die, we're 90% microbes and only 10% human. And so
Mm,
they outnumber us 10 to 1, which means it's this very important, massive, and
mm,
very delicate ecosystem. When it
right.
becomes imbalanced, these microbes then cause inflammation and disease and problems. So that's our second leg to gut disease. We have toxins, we have microbial imbalances, be it fungi, parasites, or whatever it might be. The third leg is diet and nutrient deficiencies. Are you
Mhm.
eating things contributing to inflammation? Is there junk food that's feeding bad bacteria causing overgrowth or contributing to toxins, or food that is nutrient void? You're lacking vitamins and minerals and nutrients and amino acids and necessary things your body needs to build, because it's constantly healing itself. It's constantly turning things over and turning over cells. So,
Right.
are you eating things that are contributing to the problem or lacking what you need to be healing? And these are sort of the three legs to gut disease. Now, it's a Venn diagram, so there are more layers that turn to autoimmunity, but this is that sort of the three legs of gut disease: toxins, microbes, and nutrients.
Mhm. And what impact? I'm just curious because I don't disagree with your that analysis, but what about and where do you place emotions in
Mm.
this?
This is a very interesting topic. And truthfully, Mano, it's not something I claim to have an expertise on. However, what I can speak to is that our emotional regulation is huge, but then we have to ask chicken or the egg. So we know our emotional regulation can lead to immunosuppression, which will combat your body's or suppress your body's ability to combat toxins and
Right.
microbes and breakdown.
Right.
It will also, if you're in, say, fight or flight, you're going to impact your body's ability to be restful and digest. You're not going to break down, digest, absorb. Your conveyor belt, your assembly line of the gut will be all out of whack. Right? Imagine if Ford Motor Company's assembly line got all maltimed. You have a car coming out with 6 wheels and no roof. It wouldn't make sense. I mean, that'd actually be a dune buggy, it'd be pretty cool, but you get the idea. And so the assembly line gets all junked up. So our end products get messy. And so emotions and regulation have a huge part to play. Cellular wellness, we can dive into frequency and vibration and the importance of earthing and grounding and how all this starts to come into play with
Mhm.
our ideal lives integrated with nature. We do live in a world that's not compatible with our own biology. So they
Yeah.
are a huge part of what's necessary. However, it's the chicken or the egg. Does
Yeah.
somebody have emotional issues that disrupted their gut or gut problems that change the neurochemistry of their body and their brain, leading to emotional issues? And so we
Mhm.
have to figure out which one's which. And in my practice, we don't address a ton of emotion specifically. We do talk about it, but it's not something we do as much as I think I would like to. It's tough when you get 16 weeks with somebody to fix their gut disease. It's like, where do you start? But it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, I mean, I only bring it up because it's, the in the field of gastroenterology,
Mhm,
that the first connections that maybe how we feel affects our body, right? And this is
mhm.
sort of in the Descartes, model of, 3D dimension, and we don't have any other impact, right? But I do see absolutely the cycle of the chicken and egg, and the thing is, once you're in that cycle, you don't know the contributing factors just keep going, right? So
Totally.
it's very hard to kind of go, well, if you would stop being so angry,
Yes.
or hold your anger in so badly, or
Yeah.
or whatever, it might affect things. Yeah.
Oh, it does destroy your body. I mean, I that's what killed my uncle. We truly believe that he had a lot of bitterness and resentment and hatred his whole life. His doctors thought he had MS or some kind of gut disease. Test after test came back negative. There was
Right.
nothing they can confirm on their diagnostic criteria, but he was a
Yeah.
really hateful, bitter man. And his body slowly withered away and he got sicker and sicker. And we do, my family and I believe that it was bitterness that actually killed him. And so I
Mhm.
wholeheartedly believe our emotions are a huge part of that.
Mhm. Well, it could definitely create the environment that then it does all those three things. So it's very hard to know which way. And
Yes.
ultimately it doesn't matter as long as you open one door, and and start fixing parts of it, offering the body what it needs to heal. The body can figure it all out on its own.
Absolutely. You give it the
So,
tools and resources, it'll just do it. Our
yeah.
bodies know what it's doing. We can't outsmart them.
Yeah, no, no, exactly. So let's go through with no names and all of that. But let's say somebody who has irritable bowel syndrome, because
Mhm,
that's kind of the middle, you know. A lot of people have that, right? And then they'll say, "Oh, well, it's fine. It's just I'm anxious," or So how would you address this in like the way that you would, how what happens? They come to see you.
mhm.
Where do you go? Like, give us a bit of a overview of that journey.
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. I love it. So we have to look at where they are on the spectrum, right? So I have what I describe as like the gut disease ladder. So it's kind of a four-rung ladder. On the bottom, on the first side, on the bottom left, first rung, we have a healthy gut, which again, as things enter and become problematic, that wear and tear progresses to what looks like IBS or irritable bowel syndrome. And then if you're further along, you can have degrees of irritable bowel syndrome from a little bloat to some food sensitivities to one bowel. I've had people come in with one bowel movement every 2 to 4 weeks. I've had people with 50 a day. And so it really depends. But as
Yeah,
that on the second rung now, irritable bowel progresses all the way to the right. Well, now you have maybe IBD or inflammatory bowel disease, which is where we get to our Crohn's colitis rung,
yeah,
up to the next, which is your autoimmune. How severe is it? How many layers do you get? And so it's a very layered process. So, first of all, where are you? Now, what's interesting about this approach, though, is we have to split from Western medicine. See, Western medical doctors are typically trained where they manage symptoms and have had MDs tell me it's cookbook medicine. We go in, we take a look at here are your symptoms.
mhm,
Therefore, we put you in this box. We give it a label. That's your diagnosis. Now, that
right,
word to them is like, here's the condition. Like it's innate to the human body. You just have this thing. And we have to, again, patch it with drugs. So here's your drugs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this order. And if they fail, well, we can always cut the organ out, whatever it might be, your colon, maybe it's you get a hysterectomy or your gallbladder gets removed or whatever they do. They just snip, snip. And so what we want to do is understand disease is not innate. So we
mhm,
have to go back to where this all started. Rather
yeah,
than going all the way to the right from symptoms, diagnosis, inevitability, drugs, we go left. Let's talk about what's happening now. Okay, Well, take me back to the first time this started. When did you start having irritable bowel issues? Were you a 3-year-old? Were you a colicky baby? Or is it something that developed in your teens? Maybe it was after food poisoning or a certain vaccination you had gotten done. Maybe it was after, a trauma or traveling. You went out somewhere. Maybe you ate something. There's always a root. When we can find that, we know what threads to start pulling on. So we have to look at a few things. One, what is the beginning? Where did it start? Because then we can predictably tell you how you got to the place you are. With 80 plus, maybe 90% accuracy, we can, quote, read somebody's mail. Okay, so it started at this age, it finished here. By the time you were this age, did you experience X? Yep, okay. What about this one? Did you experience Y? Yep, okay. And Z. And we go through this process because the degradation of health is very predictable.
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
Once you know what you're looking at. And so we go back to the root, we figure out where it started, and then along the way, we just begin fixing the residual damage that was done. So if someone has a parasite, well, that parasite may have led to anemia, it may have led to SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, maybe it's led to um, a myriad of issues. You're grinding your teeth. You got dark circles under your eyes. You're fatigued. You've got bowel issues. You got bowel disease. Maybe you've got gallbladder issues and your drainage pathways, your liver and lymphs are all clogged up. So we have to start fixing these in the appropriate order, and then we can begin reversing the disease. But it begins with a thorough history. It begins with some symptoms and understanding the root. Unfortunately, Western doctors get 7 or 8 minutes with you because they have to get compensated by insurance. They don't have the time. Whereas practitioners like you and I can spend an hour or two sometimes going through history and dissecting things to figure out where it started.
And I just want to reiterate in different words, but the same notion, right? When you're talking about this scale that keeps going, it's as if, and it's like that's kind of the break of thinking. It's the diagnosis are just names that they call conventionally in allopathic medicine a stage, but they're not inherent to you. The entire stages, all the journey is just a deterioration of the same problem, basically, right?
Beautifully said.
Right. So, and I think that really helps also. I mean, I got it like you said it, I just put it in different words, but the idea that it's finding out where you are so we can work backwards to the root of this, right? And deal with the some of the symptoms why are they being aggravated? Like, if, for example, inflammation could easily be aggravated, one, with the wrong terrain, but also adding endlessly foods that the body can't tolerate or doesn't like, right?
Contributing over and over to the same issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you shared a case that was so remarkable at the beginning, but what would you like to share? Maybe, maybe a case that you didn't think you could help, or that you found really challenging from your point of view, and then you figured out, just to kind of understand the breadth of what what's possible for people.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough one to answer with at the risk of sounding arrogant. It's not the idea. Most of these cases aren't very difficult. And luckily I do have help. You know, I have one of my mentors has been working with me for about half a decade. And if I have really tricky stuff, they go to him. He helps me with all that as well. So there's a big difference in who we're seeing and what kind of conditions come in. But we've had people, like I said, with one bowel movement every 2 weeks to a bowel movement every month. We've had people with 50 a day. And it depends on the person, you know. So I can use some of these names. They're publicly available. They have, testimonials on the website and everything as well. But Karen, for example, came in to see us and she was 52 at the time. And she had this for 16, 17 years, severe bowel disease. And she was up to 50 bowel movements a day, blood, mucus, pain. And she had gone through the medical system. She had seen her doctor. She had 3 different specialists at the Mayo Clinic who all said, arguably or ridiculously enough, eat whatever you want. Food has no bearing on bowel disease. I'm like, that's 3rd grade biology. Of course it does. She went through all the drugs, all the medication, all the immunosuppressives, all the steroids and anti-inflammatories and couldn't get any relief. 3 weeks, circling back to your original point, emotions and nervous system, high stress, overrun. We just for 3 weeks worked on driving her nervous system down, getting her to relax and sleep and just relax more, like to chill. And she went from 50 bowel movements to 5 to 8 in 3 weeks, most relief she's had in 15, 16 years. And
Wow.
so sometimes it can be that simple. Now, there are many layers, you know, she's got parasites and fungal issues that we were dealing with and, talking about. But the reality is some people can find relief very quickly. On the other hand, we have had people who were a bit trickier. I had a fella come in, I can't use his name for confidentiality, of course, but he was dealing with some really severe bowel issues. Tall kid as well, 6'2" and about 130 pounds, rail thin, losing a ton of weight. And his gut was really tricky. It wasn't responding. He was really plugged up. His drainage pathways, his bile ducts, his liver, his lymphatic system was all just really messy. And so we worked to try to get him to make some progress, but he lived in Vancouver as well. And so we ship a lot of stuff from the States. There was time delays and they took a while getting started. They kind of hummed and hawed on getting started for months. I had trouble getting to his root cause. And then as communication gets missed, we meet weekly, but if you miss 3 or 4, it gets really tough to work with someone if we don't see them all the time. And unfortunately, a whole lot of factors on our end and their end, he ended up not getting better, ended up going in for emergency surgery. And so they ended up removing his entire colon. And so unfortunately, there are some cases where timing is everything. We have a little girl. We were talking with her, and I don't mean to put this on the parents, but I just mean to say that time is of the essence with bowel disease. You never know. 11-year-old girl, we were talking last summer, and her parents kind of hummed and hawed, like, do we work with them? Do we not? Like, do we get help? Whatever. And her mom's a nurse, so she's conventionally trained. But unfortunately, this little girl, they just got started maybe a month ago at the time of this recording. And within a couple of days of just getting their paperwork started, she went in for emergency surgery. And so we never know where somebody's at. Time is of the essence. And if you're dealing with bowel disease, it can be really extreme. On the other hand, 16 years of bloody stool, 50 bowel movements a day, and we see relief in 3 weeks and people are getting better. So it is unfortunately a big, wide spectrum, but fortunately, wherever you are, there's still a great deal of hope.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would concur, though that was not my specialty, but I think too, you could probably speak to the fact that if you deal with gut issues, because that's what you come in with, let's say, that a whole bunch of surprising other diagnoses disappear.
Yes, weird how that happens.
Do you have a case that comes to mind?
Oh, so many.
There's so many.
So many. So we have people coming in. I'll give you kind of a variety. We have people coming in with depression, anxiety, skin issues. They're going in for facials and colonics and all kinds of stuff who no longer need to go into the esthetician for their regular facials because their skin is better than ever because they're detoxing. We have people coming in, body covered head to toe in psoriasis. Well, that psoriasis and eczema is a textbook parasite issue. When we look externally at the body, it was parasites causing the bowel disease. The psoriasis went away. Hair loss goes away. Women dealing with really bad PMS symptoms. And if you're having PMS symptoms, you're having breast tenderness, you're having bloating, cramping, even women you're fully developed, you're over 20, 25, and your breasts are still growing, there's an estrogenic issue. Your estrogens are probably recycling and you're actually having more problems. Dark, thick, clotted menstrual blood versus bright red and thin. These are all symptoms of hormonal imbalances. We've had people, women coming in who have had severe menstrual issues that the doctor said was not connected to their IBD. whether
Mm-mm.
they're gut disease. But you fix the gut and the menstrual issues fix themselves because they're no longer recycling these other estrogens and these hormones start to
Exactly.
rebalance. Hashimoto's, which is supposed to be an incurable autoimmune diagnosis.
Mhm.
Curtis on our team here has fully reversed. Their antibodies are gone. There's no longer Hashimoto's in some of these clients we see. So we talk about external manifestations, we call them EIMs or extra intestinal manifestations. These are how diseases manifest outside of the gut. And
Mhm.
all diseases can begin in the leaky gut. And so if you have a condition, no matter what it is, I had ADHD myself. I was diagnosed with moderate to severe, and through dealing with my gut and fixing things, 99% resolved. And so there's a lot of things that we can do by just addressing the gut.
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree.
Mm.
Definitely. Let's see, what else have we? Is there something that you wanted to share despite all my questions that you like you're dying to say here?
Nothing I'm dying to say. I mean, I think it's what's really important. When we start looking at disease,
Yeah.
again, I'd like to reiterate Western medical doctors look at disease states and disease conditions as if they're innate to the human body or they're just genetic. Genetics are the weak link. You get three people in a room, you can expose all three of them to mold. One might get bowel disease, one might get asthma, one might get arthritis. Put a fourth in there who gets Hashimoto's. You put a fifth in there who gets some kind of skin condition, or their hair falls out, whatever it is. Your genetics are the chain. That weak link is the one that breaks. If you're genetically predisposed to
Mhm.
expressing inflammation through a pathway, through an organ system based on your genes, that's where it will go.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is to say to people like, look, don't accept a diagnosis as just being this inevitability. Don't accept it for being a condition that can't be helped. A diagnosis is just a term that describes your symptoms. It tells you what is going on, where it is happening, but it does not tell you why. All they do is push you to medication to mask your symptoms. And I think about it this way, if you have a hostage in your living room, I don't know if you've ever taken a hostage, but no, God forbid you have. But if you have someone in your living room screaming, they want to leave, and you put tape over their mouth, and you go, look, we fixed the problem. We can't hear them scream. They're still not happy to be there. That's what medications do. Your body screams with symptoms saying, help me. I'm inflamed. I'm dysfunctional. Do something. Then we medicate and mask the symptom, put tape over its mouth, and go, look, we solved the problem.
Mhm.
A diagnosis means nothing. It's a descriptive word, not an inevitability. And so I'd encourage people not to accept that. Look to a functional practitioner, like someone like yourself, Manon. You got practitioners, people who do this for a living, and it can all be reversed. We just have to figure out the root cause and why you're
Right.
experiencing.
Okay. Now, question, do you, because we're on Zoom here, do you or your clinic take new patients, and how
Yes,
do you
we do.
work with, and is it local, or can you do it a combination? I'm sure some of the tests must be done, but
Yeah, of course. So the good news is, just being a lowly nutritionist, we're not actually run by a bunch of governing bodies. And so we have a lot more flexibility. Thank God for that. We can work all around the world. I'm here in Calgary, Alberta, up in Canada. We've got
oh,
clients in the States, in the UK, Vietnam, New Zealand, Australia, Africa, parts of
yeah,
Europe, Central Eastern. We work everywhere.
yeah,
Which is a blessing because we're not controlled by a regulating agency who says, nope, you can only give these drugs, which is very challenging. And so it's
oh,
very
we've
easy to
seen
work with
that, right?
us. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. And I'm sure you've had that too.
in the last few years, when certain
Mhm.
drugs are not allowed for, financial reasons, basically.
And then suddenly they're allowed again after everything closes and the money's been made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, history repeats itself, but no, that's great to know. So you're in Canada, great. So one question with the increase of turbo cancers, these fast, suddenly occurring cancers that nobody understands why they're coming. I was just curious if you have come across them or if you have resources for people.
Yeah, so I'm not a cancer specialist, but I've actually met with some of the top doctors doing this. I had a chance to interview Dr. Paul Merrick of the FLCCC. Brilliant, brilliant physician. He's been cited over 46,000 times in medical literature, most educated man on planet Earth. Big fan. And he actually has a document called Cancer Care. It's the role of repurposed drugs and metabolic interventions in treating cancer. That can be found on the FLCC's website. If you type in FLCCC cancer care, the document will come up. But a lot of these cancers we're seeing post-virus, if I can say the word without getting things banished, but post-jabs, we're seeing a lot of these cancers coming up. There's a lot of immunomodulation, and a lot of these drugs, these mRNA shots, have actually really dramatically suppressed our body's ability to fight off certain cancers. That on top of the spike proteins and other issues we're now seeing. There's also some interesting theories around, quickly as a sidebar, around parasites and cancers, that things like cancer tumors might actually be encasing something toxic in your body to try to protect you from it, which is very fascinating, which is where we start to biopsy. There's a huge prevalence of cancers metastasizing and spreading around the body. So it's an interesting thing to explore. But Paul Merrick, I had him on my show, and he was talking about a prescription medication, antiparasitic, called mebendazole, which has been used for antiparasite. And there were some well-known celebrities who had stage 4 cancer diagnosis, stage 3, stage 4, who took this mebendazole, gone. It was cured. And this went from something like 15 cents a pill to $555 per pill after the fact, because the pharmaceutical industries decided, well, look what we have. It's a golden goose. Let's charge more. And so some really interesting research around it. Again, I'm not a cancer specialist myself, but check out that document from the FLCCC. It'll blow your mind.
Well, I'm sure there's lots of people that you'll be hearing from.
Well, we look forward to it. Easiest way to reach us if you guys want to chat. We got a podcast called Reversible. That's Reverse Able, the Ultimate Gut Health Podcast. You can reach us on social, anywhere we can be found. It's all at gutsolution.ca. That's gutsolution, all singular, .ca for Canada, gutsolution.ca. We'd love to hear from you, feedback, contact questions. We're here to help.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Josh Dech, and this is great.
It's a pleasure, Manon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.